"Ma'am, do you have some change for food?" The raspy, hesitant voice made Sarah stop at the courthouse steps. The man standing before her was about 45 years old, wearing clean but worn clothes, with that look she knew all too well, a mixture of desperation and shame from someone not used to asking for help. Sarah Martinez, a 29-year-old registered nurse, had just walked out of her third rejected job interview that week. The meeting had started promisingly. The HR director praised her credentials, her trauma care certifications, her stellar academic record. Then came the background check, the phone calls, the sudden cooling of enthusiasm. By the end, she was hearing the same coded rejection she'd memorized by now: "We'll be in touch if anything changes." In her wallet, she had exactly $18, her last money until she could find work. Her rent was due in 3 days, and she'd already sold everything valuable in her small apartment. Her 7-year-old daughter Emma was at school, blissfully unaware that they might be homeless by the weekend. "Of course," Sarah replied without hesitation, pulling out a $10 bill. "Get something warm. It's getting cold outside." The man stared at the bill with genuine surprise. Most people crossed the street when they saw him coming. The tattoos on his hands, the weathered face, the careful way he moved spoke of a hard life lived in places society preferred to forget. "Ma'am, this is too much. I just needed a couple bucks for a sandwich." "Keep it all. Life's hard enough for everyone right now." Marcus Thompson, an ex-convict released just 4 months ago after serving 8 years for armed robbery, felt something break inside his chest. In the past year of conditional freedom, he'd faced dozens of rejections at job interviews. His criminal record was a permanent mark that closed doors before he even had a chance to speak. The parole officer meetings, the mandatory check-ins, the constant suspicion, all of it reminded him daily that society saw him as irredeemable. That morning had been particularly brutal. He'd applied for a warehouse position, manual labor, minimum wage, nothing that required trust or responsibility. The manager had looked at his application, seen the conviction box checked, and told him the position had just been filled despite the "now hiring" sign still hanging in the window. "Why did you do that?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "Most people cross the street when they see me coming." Sarah gave him a tired smile that carried the weight of her own struggles. "Because everyone deserves a second chance. And sometimes, a small act of kindness is all someone needs to keep trying." She had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. As Marcus walked toward the sandwich shop, Sarah checked her phone. Another rejection email had arrived while she was in the interview, this time from Mercy General, a hospital she'd applied to 3 weeks ago. The message was brief, professional, and devastating. "Thank you for your interest in the RN position. We have decided to move forward with other candidates." She leaned against the courthouse wall, fighting back tears of frustration. 3 years ago, she'd been a rising star in the nursing field. Her supervisors praised her clinical skills, her bedside manner, her dedication to patient care. Then Dr. Richardson happened. The harassment, the intimidation, the choice between staying silent and speaking truth. She'd chosen truth. 3 other nurses had joined her testimony, sharing their own experiences of inappropriate comments, unwanted advances, and professional retaliation when they tried to report him. For 6 months, Sarah believed justice would prevail. Dr. Richardson was suspended pending investigation. The hospital promised a thorough review. Then the politics kicked in. Richardson's family had donated millions to the hospital's new wing. His research brought in federal grants. His connections ran deep through the medical community's power structure. One by one, the other nurses were transferred to different departments, offered early retirement packages, or found reasons to leave healthcare entirely. Sarah held on longer than the others, believing her spotless record and exceptional performance reviews would protect her. Instead, she found herself assigned to the worst shifts, given the most difficult patients, subjected to constant scrutiny. When she finally resigned, she thought other hospitals would welcome her experience. She was wrong. Word had spread through the tight-knit medical community. Sarah Martinez was a troublemaker, a nurse who couldn't work with authority, someone who brought unnecessary drama to the workplace. Never mind her skills, her compassion, her dedication to patient safety. The system had marked her as untouchable. At that moment, watching Marcus buy a simple meal with the money she'd given him, Sarah had no idea that her small gesture of humanity was about to trigger a chain of events that would change not only her life, but the lives of dozens of other people who society had written off as beyond redemption. Marcus, sitting on a park bench savoring his first hot meal of the day, pulled out an old cell phone, a basic model his parole officer had approved. His first call was to Roberto, coordinator of the Second Chance program, an informal network of ex-convicts who met weekly at the community center, sharing job leads, emotional support, and the kind of practical wisdom that only came from shared experience of life after prison. "I need to tell you all about a nurse I just met," Marcus said, his voice filled with an emotion he hadn't felt in years, hope mixed with gratitude and something else he couldn't quite name. "I think we found someone special." What this kind woman didn't know was that her simple act of generosity was about to mobilize a network of 50 ex-convicts determined to prove that gratitude and loyalty are values that not even prison bars can break. If you believe in the transformative power of genuine kindness, don't forget to subscribe to see how a $10 gesture triggered the most emotional gratitude operation you've ever witnessed. The rejection email arrived at 6:47 a.m. the next morning. Sarah stared at her phone screen, reading the same corporate language she'd seen dozens of times. "After careful consideration, we've selected a candidate whose experience better aligns with our current needs." Memorial Hospital. The fourth rejection this week, and the 15th in 2 months. Sarah sat at her tiny kitchen table, surrounded by medical journals and certification documents that seemed worthless now. Her nursing degree from State University, her trauma care certification, her 3 years of ICU experience. None of it mattered when HR departments saw her address, her scholarship background, her community clinic references. The landlord's notice was still taped to her door: final notice, pay or quit. 72 hours to come up with $1,200 or face eviction. After giving Marcus that $10, she had $8 left and a nearly empty pantry. Her 7-year-old daughter Emma would be asking about breakfast soon, and Sarah had no answers left to give. She opened her laptop and scrolled through her email history. 37 applications sent. 15 responses received. All rejections. The pattern was always the same: enthusiasm after reviewing her credentials, then silence after the background check revealed her involvement in the Richardson case. Word traveled fast in the tight-knit medical community, and apparently, integrity was a liability. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus sat in a circle of plastic chairs at the community center, surrounded by 12 other men. The Second Chance meeting happened every Wednesday at 7 p.m., a support group that nobody talked about outside these walls. "Tell them about the nurse," Roberto urged, his weathered hands folded in his lap. At 58, Roberto had been out of prison for 8 years and now worked as a janitor at a law firm, the only job that would hire him despite his accounting degree. Marcus cleared his throat. "Yesterday, I asked someone for help for the first time since I got out. This woman, a nurse, she didn't hesitate. Gave me $10 without thinking twice. Found out later she's been unemployed for months, struggling just like us." "What's her name?" asked Tommy, a 34-year-old ex-convict who'd been out for 6 months and worked construction when he could find day labor. "Sarah Martinez. Lives in the Riverside apartments." Carlos, the youngest at 26, shook his head. "Riverside? That's rough. Landlords there don't mess around with late rent. And those apartments, they're not safe for a woman alone. She helped you knowing she was broke?" Roberto's voice carried a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "That's rare, brother. Real rare." Marcus nodded. "She said everyone deserves a second chance. Made me think about something. When's the last time someone showed us kindness without wanting something back?" The room fell silent. These men knew rejection intimately. Job interviews that ended the moment background checks revealed their past. Apartment applications denied. Relationships destroyed by stigma. Society had written them off as irredeemable, dangerous, worthless. Yet here was a woman facing her own systematic persecution, and she'd chosen compassion over self-preservation. "What do we know about her situation?" Roberto asked quietly. "I did some checking," admitted Dave, a former accountant who'd served 5 years for embezzlement and now worked at a car wash. His contacts in the white-collar world still fed him information when he needed it. Sarah Martinez, RN. Graduated top 10% of her class. No criminal record, excellent references. But she's been blacklisted by every major hospital in the city. Blacklisted? Why? Tommy asked. Dave pulled out a tablet, showing them a news article from 3 years ago. She testified against Dr. Richardson at City General. Sexual harassment case. 3 other nurses backed her up, but Richardson had connections on the hospital board. He kept his job, got promoted actually. They all got quietly pushed out. The room erupted in angry murmurs. These men understood retaliation, understood how the system protected the powerful while crushing those who dared speak truth. So she's being punished for doing the right thing, Carlos said, his jaw tightening. Just like we're being punished for mistakes we already paid for. It's worse than that, Dave continued, scrolling through more articles. Look at this, Richardson just got appointed to head the Regional Nursing Certification Board. He has influence over hiring decisions at hospitals across 3 counties. Son of a. Tommy caught himself, glancing around the circle. Sorry, but that means she can't even move to find work. He's got her trapped. Roberto stood up slowly, his chair creaking under his weight. He'd learned patience in his 8 years of freedom, but the fire in his eyes revealed old anger rekindling. Gentlemen, I think we found someone who deserves what we never got, a real second chance. James, a former teacher who'd been quiet until now, cleared his throat. My wife works in medical billing. She's heard about Richardson. Apparently, he's got a list of problem nurses women who've filed complaints or testified in harassment cases. HR departments share that information informally. An actual blacklist, Dave muttered. That's illegal. Proving it is another matter, James replied. But Sarah's not the only one. There are at least 6 other nurses in similar situations. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, the same feeling he'd had when Sarah looked at him with kindness instead of fear. She risked everything to protect other women, and now she can't even protect herself. What Sarah didn't know was that while she slept in her cold apartment, worried about tomorrow's eviction notice, 12 men were making a decision that would prove sometimes the people society fears most are the ones who understand justice better than anyone else. The next morning, Roberto made a phone call that would change everything. Listen, I need you to meet me at the warehouse. We got something important to discuss. By 10 a.m., 23 men had gathered in an abandoned warehouse that served as their unofficial headquarters. These weren't the stereotypical criminal society imagined. There was James, a former teacher who'd served time for a DUI that killed someone, Antonio, an ex-gang member who now mentored at-risk youth, and Mike, a white-collar criminal who understood the legal system better than most lawyers. Here's what we know, Dave said, projecting Sarah's information onto a makeshift screen. Sarah Martinez, 29 years old. Single mother to a 7-year-old daughter named Emma. Eviction notice expires tomorrow at noon. 0 job prospects because she stood up to a predator. The room fell silent as they absorbed the parallels to their own stories. Good people destroyed by a system that protected the wrong people. What's the plan? Asked Antonio, rolling up his sleeves. Roberto stood up. Same thing we do for any family member in trouble. We fix it. But this time, we do it right. No shortcuts, no favors that could come back to hurt her. Everything legal, everything clean. While the men strategized, Sarah sat in the unemployment office, staring at a computer screen showing 0 job matches for her qualifications. The counselor, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, barely looked up from her paperwork. Have you considered lowering your salary expectations? Maybe looking at positions that don't require your specialized experience. Translation: You're overqualified and we both know why you can't get hired. Sarah nodded politely, gathered her papers, and walked out into the cold afternoon. She had 6 hours until her daughter came home from school, 6 hours to find a miracle. Back at the warehouse, the men had divided into teams. Mike was working his contacts in the legal community, looking for employment lawyers who specialized in retaliation cases. James was researching hospital administrators, looking for someone with integrity who might give Sarah a real chance. But it was Tommy who made the breakthrough. Guys, you're not gonna believe this, he said, bursting into the warehouse with a laptop under his arm. I found something. He connected to their projector and pulled up a news article from 2 weeks ago. St. Mary's Community Hospital receives $2.3 million grant for trauma center expansion, seeks qualified nursing staff. St. Mary's is different, Tommy explained. My cousin works there. They actually hire people with records, give second chances. The head of nursing, Dr. Patricia Williams, she's been fighting discrimination in healthcare for 30 years. Roberto smiled slowly. So we got our target. Now we need our approach. Marcus cleared his throat. What if we tell her the truth? Not about helping Sarah specifically, but about what we're trying to do. Show her that people like us can recognize real character when we see it. That's risky, Dave warned. She might think we're trying to manipulate her. Or, said Roberto, she might respect the honesty. Sometimes the direct approach is the only one that works. As evening fell, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with a calculator and a pile of bills. No matter how she arranged the numbers, they didn't add up to survival. The eviction notice stared back at her from the refrigerator door. In 8 hours, she'd have to tell Emma they were losing their home. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through job listings one more time, hope fading with each rejection she'd already received. Then she saw it, a new posting that had gone live just an hour ago: St. Mary's Community Hospital, RN position available, trauma unit, apply immediately. Her hands trembled as she clicked on the application link. Could this be the break she'd been praying for? What Sarah didn't know was that 40 minutes earlier, Dr. Patricia Williams had received a phone call from a group of men she'd never met, telling her about a nurse whose character had been tested in ways most people would never understand, and who'd passed with flying colors every single time. The interview was scheduled for 2 p.m. sharp. Sarah arrived at St. Mary's Community Hospital 15 minutes early, her hands still trembling from nerves. The building looked different from the sterile corporate hospitals that had rejected her, warmer, more welcoming, with community artwork lining the walls. Dr. Patricia Williams, head of nursing, was a black woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She gestured for Sarah to sit across from her in the small conference room. Ms. Martinez, I've reviewed your application and credentials. Impressive record, especially your trauma care certifications. Dr. Williams paused, studying Sarah's face. I'm curious though, why haven't you been working for the past 8 months? Sarah's heart sank. Here it comes. The question that ended every other interview. I testified in a sexual harassment case against Dr. Richardson at City General. 3 other nurses and I came forward. After that, I found it difficult to find employment. Dr. Williams nodded slowly. The Richardson case. I remember reading about it. You testified despite knowing it could cost you your career. Yes, ma'am. I couldn't stay silent when I knew other women were being hurt. And you've been struggling financially since then? Sarah hesitated. This was usually where interviews ended. Yes, ma'am. I've been facing some challenges. Dr. Williams leaned forward. Ms. Martinez, I received an interesting phone call yesterday. From someone who wanted to tell me about a nurse who used her last $10 to help a stranger, even though she was facing eviction. Sarah's breath caught. I don't understand. Marcus Thompson. Does that name ring a bell? Sarah's eyes widened. Marcus? How do you know Marcus? Dr. Williams smiled. Because Marcus and his friends called me. They told me about a woman who showed kindness to someone society had written off. They told me about your character, your integrity, your courage to do what's right even when it costs you everything. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. They called you? Not just called. They did their homework. They found out about the Richardson case, about why you've been blacklisted, about your daughter, about your eviction notice. They asked me to give you the chance that other hospitals wouldn't. The door opened and Marcus walked in, followed by Roberto, Dave, and Tommy. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Sarah, Marcus said quietly, I told you everyone deserves a second chance. Turns out, we all needed to give you yours. Dr. Williams stood up. Ms. Martinez, these men spent 2 days researching your background, not to judge you, but to understand why someone with your qualifications and character couldn't find work. They presented me with evidence of systematic retaliation against whistleblowers in our healthcare system. Roberto stepped forward. Doctor, we know what it's like to be judged for our past, to have doors slammed in our faces. But Sarah? She chose to help someone like me when she had every reason to walk away. That's the kind of person we want working in our community. Dr. Williams turned back to Sarah. The position is yours if you want it. $68,000 starting salary, full benefits, and will help you with relocation expenses if needed. You start Monday. Sarah broke down sobbing. I I can't believe this is real. It's real because you made it real, Dr. Williams said. Your kindness created a ripple effect that brought all of us together. Marcus knelt beside Sarah's chair. You saved me that day, not just with $10, but by seeing me as human. Now we get to return the favor. What Sarah discovered in that moment was that justice doesn't always come from courts or institutions. Sometimes it comes from the people who understand struggle, recognize character, and refuse to let good people fall through the cracks of an unfair system. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the trauma bay at St. Mary's Community Hospital, her hands steady as she administered care to a car accident victim. The same hands that once trembled over unpaid bills now moved with confidence and purpose. Her daughter Emma sat in the hospital's daycare center just 2 floors up, no longer wondering if they'd have a home tomorrow. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. Sarah's first weeks at St. Mary's were intense, relearning protocols, building trust with colleagues, proving herself worthy of the second chance she'd been given. But Dr. Williams had been right about one thing. Sarah's struggles had made her stronger, more empathetic, better at her job. Code Blue, Trauma Bay 3, the intercom crackled. Sarah rushed to assist, working alongside a team that had become her second family. As she helped save another life, she thought about how different things might have been if she'd walked past Marcus that day outside the courthouse. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus unlocked the doors to Second Chance Construction, the business he'd started with Roberto and 5 other group members. The company specialized in renovation projects for low-income families, funded partly by grants Dr. Williams had helped them secure. You ready for this? Roberto asked, reviewing the day's schedule. They were renovating 3 homes in Sarah's old neighborhood, including Mrs. Patterson's apartment, the elderly woman Sarah had mentioned during her first day at the hospital. The business had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Local contractors, impressed by their work quality and integrity, began offering partnerships. The city started referring parolees to their job training program. What had begun as 12 men supporting each other had evolved into a network of over 50 ex-convicts helping their community rebuild, literally and figuratively. Tommy walked into the office carrying coffee and the morning newspaper. You guys see this? He said, spreading the paper on Roberto's desk. The headline read, Local Hospitals Community Outreach Program Reduces Recidivism by 40%. The article detailed how St. Mary's partnership with Second Chance Construction had created jobs for former inmates while addressing healthcare disparities in underserved neighborhoods. Sarah was quoted extensively, explaining how her experience with Marcus had inspired the hospital's new approach to community healing. She's still changing lives, Marcus said quietly, reading over Roberto's shoulder. That afternoon, Sarah received a text from Marcus, Community Center ribbon cutting ceremony next week. Hope you can make it. The Riverside Community Center, built by Second Chance Construction and funded through a collaboration between St. Mary's Hospital and several local organizations, stood where an abandoned lot had once attracted drug dealers and broken dreams. The ceremony drew hundreds of people. Sarah watched as Marcus cut the ribbon, surrounded by the men who'd helped build not just the center, but a new model for reintegration. City officials, hospital administrators, and former skeptics stood side by side, applauding what had once seemed impossible. Dr. Richardson, the doctor whose harassment had cost Sarah her previous career, approached her during the reception. Sarah, I owe you an apology, he said quietly. What you did took courage I didn't have. And what you've built here, it's remarkable. Sarah looked at him, then at the children playing in the center's new playground, at the ex-convicts teaching job skills to teenagers, at the medical clinic providing free health care to families who couldn't afford it elsewhere. We all get chances to choose who we want to be, she told him. The question is whether we take them. As the sun set over the community center, Sarah found Marcus standing alone near the building's entrance, looking up at the plaque that read, Dedicated to the belief that kindness creates more kindness, and second chances change everything. You know what the amazing thing is? Marcus said as Sarah joined him. That $10 you gave me didn't just change my life. It changed 50 lives. Maybe 100. And it's still growing. Sarah smiled, watching Emma play with other children whose parents worked at Second Chance Construction. I used to think helping one person was small, she said. Now I know it's everything. The best revenge against a system that tries to break good people isn't anger or bitterness. It's building something better than they ever imagined possible. Sarah learned that $10 and an open heart could transform not just one life, but an entire community. If this story inspired you to believe in the power of second chances and genuine kindness, subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove ordinary people can create extraordinary change.